One of the strongest and most enigmatic voices in rock and roll history is that of Roy Orbison. The man whose music had an almost ghostly anguish was hidden behind the black clothing and dark sunglasses that gave him his appearance. For decades, the contradiction baffled both reviewers and fans. How could a man who was so emotionally calm on stage have his songs seem so depressing? For a long time, the solution was concealed under legends and celebrity. It's the answer to the Roy Orbison conundrum, and it's not a good one. When he was 6 years old, his father taught him how to play the guitar, and by the time he was 8, he was performing on Fort Worth's local radio station, KERB. When Orbison went to Wink, Texas, and formed his first band in high school, it became evident that the quiet youngster with thick glasses wasn't only pursuing a dream. The Wink Westerners were their name. He had an escape route in mind. We'll show you everything today. Music's breakthrough and transformation. In 1956, Roy Orbison signed with Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee, marking the start of his actual career. At the time, Sun was home to many well-known performers, including Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash, and Elvis Presley. Orbison's early records featured the rockabilly sound that the label popularized. Orbison's distinctive vocal and musical instincts didn't quite mesh with Sun Records' high-energy rockabilly sound, despite considerable regional exposure and some national success, peaking at number 59 on the Billboard Hot 100. Orbison was dissatisfied with Sun Records and the constraints of the genre at the end of the 1950s. He composed songs for other singers, such as Claudette, which became a hit for the Everly Brothers, while working as a songwriter for Acuff Rose Music in Nashville for a short time. He was able to reevaluate his artistic approach and sharpen his writing abilities throughout this period. He signed with Fred Foster's indie company, Monument Records, in 1959. The rest is history. After being rejected by the Everly Brothers and Elvis Presley, Roy Orbison co-wrote the song, Only the Lonely, which he released in 1960. The song deviates from the lively rock norms of the era with its eerie vocals and orchestral accompaniment. Orbison became a household name in the US and the UK after Only the Lonely peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the UK singles chart. He had an incredible run of hits during the following 4 years. His 1961 single, Running Scared, which had a soaring, unaccompanied crescendo at the end, defied conventional song structure and demonstrated his ability to use melody to convey emotion. Crying became another record that year. It peaked at number 2 in the United States and garnered Orbison a Grammy Hall of Fame award in 2002. In Dreams, released in 1963, had a unique structure with a number of abrupt key changes and no repeated chorus,
shielding him from attention and concealing his fragility. They gave him a sense of mystery that simultaneously defined and shielded him, making Roy Orbison the embodiment of grief in fashionable clothing. Furthermore, Roy Orbison was not blind, in spite of popular assumption and a lot of myths. His unwavering usage of dark shades, his motionless stage demeanor, and the intense emotional content of his songs, all of which gave him an almost otherworldly aura, were the causes of the misunderstanding. Orbison actually needed heavy corrective lenses because of his severe myopia and astigmatism, which resulted him impaired vision. His prescription sunglasses served as a useful remedy for his eyesight issues and eventually came to symbolize him. Orbison never actively promoted the myth of his blindness, but he also didn't try to dispel it, possibly realizing that the mysterious image it contributed to enhanced his appeal as the Caruso of rock, a man whose eerie voice and enigmatic appearance became inextricably linked to his legend. Nevertheless, audiences today are able to fully appreciate the human cost of Orbison's eerie legacy. Thank you for watching, and that's it for now. Was this video enjoyable to you? To ensure you don't miss our upcoming videos, kindly like, share, and subscribe if you did. Additionally, you should not miss this incredible video that you are currently viewing.
This was just one more instance of Orbison defying the conventional pop formula. Continuing his streak of chart supremacy, his hit song, It's Over, peaked at the top of the UK charts. Oh, Pretty Woman, one of his most well-known early successes, was released in August 1964. The song, which he co-wrote with his longtime partner Bill Dees, featured a catchy guitar riff and a self-assured vocal performance that preserved the emotional depth of his previous ballads. Orbison's greatest commercial triumph was "Oh, Pretty Woman," which peaked at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and remained there for 3 weeks. In addition, it sold over 7 million copies worldwide and peaked at number 1 in the UK. Guitarists Billy Sanford and Jerry Kennedy's opening riff on the song would inspire future generations of rock artists, and its appeal persisted to the point where it was used as the title of the romantic comedy Pretty Woman, 1990, which starred Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. In addition to the economic success of his tracks, Orbison's completely original vocal style was what set him apart during this time. He could seamlessly transition from silent, trembling reflection to strong, full-throated climaxes within a single song because to his operatic 3-octave vocal range. His voice was frequently compared to that of classical tenors, which led to his being dubbed the Big O, a reference to his commanding presence despite his quiet demeanor, and the Caruso of rock, a reference to the well-known Italian opera singer Enrico Caruso. Orbison's performing style was noticeably immobile, in contrast to many of his contemporaries who relied on flair and overt charisma on stage. During concerts, he frequently stood motionless and seldom ever moved or danced. His distinctive appearance consisted of black attire, a solemn expression, and dark sunglasses, which he initially wore due to vision problems but subsequently embraced as a component of his mystique. His persona contrasted sharply with the youthful optimism of the rock culture of the early 1960s, when bands like the Beach Boys and the Beatles exuded youthful energy. Conversely, Orbison's songs resonated with audiences who felt excluded from the mainstream of adolescent love, rebellion, and escape because they discussed isolation, heartbreak, and desire. Another distinctive quality of Orbison's songs was its melancholy, longing, and loss-filled content. Outside of the US, Orbison enjoyed great success. Between 1960 and 1965, he had 22 singles on the Billboard Top 40, including 2 number 1 hits and 10 top 10 records. In addition, he toured extensively in the UK and Europe, most notably on the same bill as the Beatles during their 1963 UK tour. Orbison's distinct approach maintained his popularity and respect among a new generation of performers despite the British invasion's changes to rock music. However, Orbison's success in the United States started to wane by the mid-1960s as musical preferences began to shift. However, he continued to have a significant influence on musicians like U2's Bono, Jeff Lynne, Bruce Springsteen, and K.D. Lang. Orbison's voice, according to Springsteen, made you want to drive your car off a cliff. However, Orbison's once glittering career had begun a phase of obvious decline by the 1970s. Decline and the comeback of the 80s. As rock music took on new forms, the man who had dominated the early 1960s with soaring vocals and emotionally powerful ballads found himself marginalized. A change in musical preferences brought about by the British invasion, the emergence of psychedelic rock, and the success of singer-songwriters like James Taylor and Carole King made Orbison's sound seem outdated. After leaving Monument Records in 1965, he joined with MGM Records in an effort to reinvent himself as his commercial appeal started to wane. The Fastest Guitar Alive and Roy Orbison Sings were among the more than a dozen albums he released for MGM between 1965 and 1973, although none of them were as successful commercially or critically as his earlier efforts. This challenging time was exacerbated by personal tragedy. Claudette Frady Orbison, Orbison's wife, died in a motorbike accident in Gallatin, Tennessee, in 1966. 2 of his 3 kids, Roy DeWayne and Anthony, perished in a fire that destroyed his Hendersonville, Tennessee, house just 2 years later in 1968. Orbison had emotional distress as a result of these losses, which naturally had an impact on his work. Even though he kept going on occasional tours, his albums didn't do well in the charts, and he became less visible on popular radio. He was mostly considered a sentimental figure by the middle of the 1970s, admired but no longer relevant in the rapidly changing music scene that was dominated by disco, glam rock, and the burgeoning punk. However, a younger generation of rock musicians who had grown up with Roy Orbison's songs sparked his incredible, unanticipated comeback in the 1980s. In interviews and live performances, musicians such as Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan often commended Orbison, highlighting the song's emotional impact and potency. Springsteen frequently referred to Orbison as one of the purest voices in rock, having covered In Dreams and mentioning him in his lyrics, particularly in Thunder Road. Longtime Orbison fan Dylan once remarked that his voice made you cry just to listen to it. Their admiration contributed to the public's renewed interest in the guy known as the Big O. When Orbison won a Grammy Award in 1981 and gained widespread fame once more, the decade of Renaissance started to take shape. He received the Grammy for Best Country Performance by a duo or group with vocal for his duet with Emmylou Harris, That Lovin' You Feelin' Again, which was featured on the soundtrack of the movie Roadie. The symbolic significance of the victory overshadowed the song's low chart performance, which peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. It signaled Orbison's return to the mainstream of music. His contributions were officially acknowledged in 1987 when he was admitted into both the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Bruce Springsteen gave a heartfelt address during the Rock Hall ceremony, which took place on January 21, 1987, at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. He referred to Orbison as the voice of heartbreak and a man whose songs captured the essence of loneliness. The recognition restored Orbison's cultural standing at a time when his influence was being felt by a new generation of musicians. He was also admitted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame that same year. In addition to improving his performance by 1988, Orbison joined forces with close friends and music lovers George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne to form a supergroup known as the Traveling Wilburys. For the project, each participant adopted a pseudonym. Orbison adopted the moniker Lefty Wilbury in homage to his hero, Lefty Frizzell. Traveling Wilburys Volume 1, their debut album, was a critical and financial triumph when it was released in October 1988. It was certified triple platinum in the United States and peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Orbison's voice was included alongside that of his renowned colleagues in songs such as Handle with Care and End of the Line. They brought him back into the spotlight and demonstrated his value in a time when MTV and synthetic pop dominated the music industry. Orbison, regrettably, would not live to witness the full magnitude of his resurgence in popularity. On December 6, 1988, while visiting his mother in Hendersonville, Tennessee, he passed away from a heart attack. He was only 52. Only a few weeks prior, he had completed his first solo record in nearly 10 years, Mystery Girl. Along with other key partners, Jeff Lynne and T-Bone Burnett produced it. It became one of his most well-known compositions as soon as it was released following his passing in January 1989, going platinum and peaking at number 5 on the Billboard 200. Co-written with Lynne and Tom Petty, the lead single, You Got It, peaked at number 10 in a number of countries, including the US, UK, and Australia. Orbison had his first US. It became a symbol of his triumphant last act and was the top 10 hit in 25 years. His legend grew over the following few decades. All genres of music have been influenced by him, and vocalists have studied and attempted to imitate his vocal style. A deluxe edition with rare demos, behind-the-scenes videos, and new recordings was released in 2014 to commemorate Mystery Girl's 25th anniversary. One of the most poignant additions was the song, The Way Is Love, which was adapted from an old voice demo that Orbison had recorded. To complete the song, Roy Orbison's kids, Wesley, Roy Jr., and Alex, collaborated with producers John Carter Cash and Jeff Lynne. The song, which featured Orbison's original voice along with new instruments and harmonies created by his kids, is both a tribute and a cooperative family legacy. Mystery Girl. Unraveled, a brief documentary that chronicled the album's production and the latter years of Orbison's life, was released alongside the song. Tenacity, emotion, and a voice that never lost its ethereal purity are characteristics of the musical legacy he left behind. However, Orbison had a difficult existence. In 1957, he wed Claudette Frady. Before he became a full-time musician, Orbison was attending North Texas State College in Odessa, Texas, where the pair first met. Claudette, his beloved, served as both a source of and an inspiration to him. Even his 1964 smash song, Claudette, a rockabilly tune that captured their joy in their early years together, featured her name. The song, which was recorded by the Everly Brothers prior to Orbison's own release, symbolized a period of romantic optimism that would soon give way to an unfathomable period of despair. Roy and Claudette's family life was successful initially. Roy Dwayne Orbison, born in 1958, Anthony King Orbison, born in 1962, and Wesley Orbison, born in 1965, were their 3 boys. Orbison, who was raised in a working-class family in Vernon, Texas, cherished his family life and frequently expressed his desire for stability and intimacy. During the wild years of the early 1960s, Claudette accompanied him on his trips and helped to fund his career. Their marriage occasionally suffered as a result of Orbison's hectic schedule and Claudette's unease with his travels. In an attempt to mend what they had created together, they soon reunited after eventually splitting up. However, that was not to be. Only a few weeks after they made the decision to try again at marriage, Claudette passed away in a motorcycle accident in Gallatin, Tennessee, on June 6, 1966. A pickup truck came out in front of her and Roy as they were riding. Claudette was gravely injured and passed away at the scene, while Roy remained unharmed. She was only 24. She was not just Orbison's wife but also the emotional cornerstone of his early artistic identity, therefore her passing devastated him. He made an effort to advance his career by concentrating on his work and putting out records under the MGM label in an attempt to replicate the success he experienced with Monument Records. However, tragedy struck once more when Roy discovered that his Tennessee house had burned down on September 14, 1968, while he was on tour in England. His 2 eldest kids, Anthony King, 6, and Roy Dwayne, 10, had perished in the fire. Wesley, his youngest kid, was visiting with his grandparents at the time, therefore he survived the catastrophe. Orbison had a pretty depressing time as a result of this. He had transformed, and his friends and fellow musicians saw it. He kept performing and recording, but his demeanor darkened and his songs became much more emotionally charged. Songs already renowned for their heartbreaking vulnerability, such as "Crying," "It's Over," and "In Dreams," gained even greater significance. Because he was inherently introverted and preferred to let his music do the talking, Orbison never discussed these losses in great depth in public. To conceal his face, he frequently wore dark shades and black clothing when he walked on stage. This was a component of his signature look. He first adopted the look to overcome stage nervousness and his sensitivity to light, but it quickly came to represent the melancholy that characterized so much of his private life. Orbison had somewhat withdrawn from the public eye by the late 1960s and early 1970s, recording music but becoming less well-known. During this time, his financial success continued to wane, and the music business appeared to abandon the delicate, operatic ballads that Orbison was known for as it quickly changed with the popularity of psychedelic rock and political protest songs. Orbison eventually found some peace in spite of the gloom. The arrival of Barbara and Marie Wellhoner Jacobs, a German-born music executive who would serve as both his life companion and a mentor in his later career, marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. In 1968, when Orbison was still in shock over the loss of his first wife and 2 sons, the two met while traveling to the United Kingdom. In his early 30s, Orbison was emotionally spent and finding it difficult to maintain his musical career in a fast-evolving field. Barbara was in her late teens and 17 years younger than him, yet they clicked immediately and grew close. On March 25, 1969, they were married in Hendersonville, Tennessee, where Orbison and Claudette had previously resided. Orbison's life began to stabilize around this point. Barbara became more than simply his wife, she became his confidant, partner, and caregiver. She was very intelligent in both business and emotional intelligence. She played a significant role in Roy's ability to negotiate the music industry following his characteristic operatic rock ballads and helped him restore some of the emotional stability he had lost. Although Roy had always been reticent and private, Barbara became his partner in public life. Together, they started a new family. Roy Kelton Orbison Jr., their first son, was born on October 18, 1970. Like his father, he would later pursue a career in music and production. Alexander Alex Orbison, their second son, was born on May 25, 1975, 5 years later. Later on, Alex would play a significant role in maintaining his father's legacy and organizing his archives. His years with Barbara were more solid than the tragically ending first chapter of Orbison's family life. After relocating to Malibu, California, the family constructed a house that served as Orbison's haven. By the mid-1970s, Orbison was no longer as well known, but Barbara never lost hope that her husband had much more to offer the world. By promoting better management of his catalog, urging more aggressive promotion of his new work, and assisting in the planning of a comeback that led to his late career renaissance, she was instrumental in his slow return to the public eye during the 1980s. Behind the scenes, Barbara was regularly involved in scheduling, communicating with producers, and making sure that the demands of Roy's comeback did not jeopardize his health, which was always a concern given his prior heart problems. Barbara stood with silent pride in 1987 as Bruce Springsteen gave an impassioned speech introducing him as the voice of heartbreak during his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. After guiding him through years of disregard and uncertainty, she now watched as his lasting contribution to music history was finally recognized by the world. The timeless nature of Roy's songwriting was further confirmed that year when he was admitted into both the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame in New York. The couple's fresh chapter was tragically cut short. Roy Orbison passed away from a heart attack in his mother's Hendersonville, Tennessee, home on December 6, 1988. He was only 52. His passing occurred months before the posthumous release of Mystery Girl, an album that would go on to become a critical and financial triumph, and only a few weeks after the publication of Traveling Wilburys Volume 1. In addition to being a widow, Barbara was left to take care of his enormous creative legacy. She gave her all in the next years to upholding Roy's reputation, taking good care of his inheritance, and spreading his music to new listeners. Barbara was responsible for the remastering and reissue of several important albums in Orbison's repertoire. She also co-produced King of Hearts, a posthumous collection of previously unheard and freshly orchestrated material, in 1992. She collaborated extensively with record labels such as Virgin Records and Sony Legacy to guarantee that his work received the respect it merited. 2014 saw the publication of Mystery Girl's 25th anniversary edition, one of her most noteworthy endeavors. Demos, unpublished songs, and a particularly moving tune called The Way Is Love, which was finished by Roy's sons Roy Jr. and Alex using a home recording Roy had done in the late 80s, were all included in the deluxe edition. Produced by Jeff Lynne and John Carter Cash, the song embodied the very legacy Barbara had spent decades creating, a bridge, connected by love, music, and memory, that connected Roy Orbison to the next generation. Barbara carried on managing Roy's legacy until December 6, 2011, 23 years after Roy's passing. She passed away from pancreatic cancer in Los Angeles at the age of 60. Roy Orbison's mysteries are finally answered. A captivating dichotomy served as the foundation for Roy Orbison's public persona. Despite being a global superstar who played sold-out gigs and was elected into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987, he remained remarkably enigmatic. A man in black, his face obscured by dark glasses, and his eerily calm stage presence enthralled both critics and audiences. Orbison's voice seemed to emanate from a secret wound, soaring and emotionally powerful. Orbison kept a private, melancholy demeanor despite his stardom, which was evident in many of his interviews and live performances. As time went on, many started to question if his eerie tone was merely an indication of romantic sensitivity or something more profound.
Deeper emotional undercurrents were alluded to by ellipses in his lyrics, abrupt vocal crescendos, and changing song structures found in hits like Crying, Running Scared, and In Dreams. Formerly confidential documents, including early notebooks, letters to Claudette and his kids, and interviews with those close to him, were progressively made public by biographers and family members. These materials showed a life marked by unresolved psychological trauma that began in his early years. Orbison, who was born in 1936 into a working-class family in Vernon, Texas, was frequently made fun of for being socially outcast, pale, quiet, and bespectacled. By the time he was 10, these comments had made him feel totally anonymous, even at home. He never really outgrew this pain. According to biographers like Ellis Amburn, those early wounds did not just go away. Orbison turned them into his songs, creating vulnerable ballads and dramatic emotional landscapes that spoke to his inner existence on a deep level. Amburn's 1990 biography, Dark Star, The Tragic Story of Roy Orbison explains how the intensely private Orbison had a voice that bled with agony and need for his craft and a face for the stage, complete with glasses, dark clothing, and calculated stillness. Orbison's medical background was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the discovery. He had experimental sinus surgeries as a teenager to address persistent breathing problems. Even while these practices are now standard, they were unorthodox at the time, and subsequent research indicates that they might have changed the structure of his voice. The outcome was the 3-octave, operatic range that became his signature sound. However, recent reports, such as discussions with medical professionals and relatives, suggest that these operations also caused him to experience persistent sinus pain, frequent headaches, and residual psychological stress. The surgeries gave Orbison a voice that was otherworldly, but they also caused him to suffer physically and mentally for the rest of his life. Furthermore, it is confirmed by new historical records, such as letters and notebooks owned by the Orbison estate and cited in the authorized Roy Orbison, that Roy was frequently sad, dependent on prescription drugs, and privately worried about staying in the music industry. He characterized his own emotional condition as weak and brittle. Though he continued to write and sing, he occasionally considered quitting performance entirely. Like his voice, Roy Orbison's black sunglasses gained notoriety. Contrary to popular belief, he didn't intentionally choose to wear them. In 1963, while on tour with the Beatles in the UK, he unintentionally left his usual prescription glasses on an airplane. He soon discovered that wearing his dark prescription sunglasses during performances allowed him to feel more in control and emotionally detached. The spectacles acquired a deeper metaphorical value as his image developed.